Welcome back. In this lecture, we're going to approach case study design issues. We're going to look at the different kinds of structures of case study designs, while keeping in mind, of course, that the caveat from the last lecture that there is no single roadmap in terms of design. Now, to kind of start out the discussion or initiate the discussion, let me give you an example of what might be a case study design. Let's say I'm interested in the relationship between how workers think about their bosses and their motivation. We want to look at very kind of broad how type questions, and so a case study might be appropriate. And so instead of going out and trying to survey multiple workers across the United States, we might simply go to one study and one city and try and study all the dynamics within the city so we can tease out the types of things that matter in terms of motivation, one of which would be the way workers feel about their bosses. So when approaching a case study design, there are a couple of different dimensions which are important. The first is a single case versus a multiple case. In most situations, multiple case designs are better. This is where we have multiple, for example, contexts to look in. And so going back to our example of worker motivation and the way that workers feel about their bosses, multiple cases here would be looking at multiple cities, trying to look at more than one city so we can get the different context sorted out, issues sorted out. A single case is less strong because we don't try and look at multiple contexts. We only try and look at one context, or in this case, one city. However, this can be appropriate in certain conditions, and we'll see a list of those in just a second. The next kind of dimension is embedded versus holistic studies. In holistic studies, there's only one unit of analysis. So that, in our example, would be the worker. We simply look at workers and how they feel and what their behavior is, or their motivation seems to be. In embedded, there are several units of analysis. So we might look at workers, we might look at units, operating units, we might look at city departments, etc. So embedded means that we're kind of building up knowledge at different levels of understanding, or different levels, in this case, of government. Now, I said I was going to talk about when a single case design might be appropriate. In general, there are 5 or 6, depending upon how you look at it, rationales for a single case design. First is that it's a critical case. There are a clear set of propositions. So sometimes you become aware of a situation which is so critical, which is so important, that you need to look at it. And in this case, you tend to get propositions which are very clear-cut. The second case is an extreme or unique case. So, for example, there were a lot of case studies done immediately after Hurricane Katrina hit. Why? Because it was an extreme, unique case of a breakdown in civil society and massive dislocation, everything like that. And so in that case, using one city as a case study was probably appropriate. Kind of the opposite of that is the representative or typical case. This is where we try and find an average or a typical case in order to represent a larger set of forces. This can be dicey because unless you're pretty sure what dimensions you're sorting representativeness on, you can end up with typical cases which aren't so typical in a lot of different ways. The fourth rationale is a revelatory case. It's where we have previously inaccessible phenomena. There's new data available because of some type of situation. This could partially be an explanation for the Hurricane Katrina type of studies also is that we didn't know a lot about how large cities with mass evacuations were going to handle it. And so this provided a nice chance for us to look at this. I hate to use nice and a hurricane in the same sentence, but from a research perspective, it was very valuable. You can also have a longitudinal case. You look at the same thing at different points in time. Now, I'm careful. That's why I don't really count these as one of the rationales, because when you have this, in my mind, you have a longitudinal study. You're looking at time series data on something, or time series narratives on something. I think this is better thought of as a longitudinal type of case. A single case can also be used as a pilot case for multiple case studies, and so we might look at a case and we can get at what data we can get or what observations we can make in a multiple case study by what we can get on a single case study. If you do this situation, you shouldn't treat this as data that is part of the analysis and linking propositions to, linking data to propositions, because there's no, we need to start over fresh. There's no continuity between the different cases, and but it still can be very powerful in terms of setting the stage for a larger multiple case study. Embedded versus holistic designs. If there are no logical subunits that can be identified, then you can use a holistic design. When a study might be conducted at too abstract of a level, you might want to use a holistic design and get key informants or something like that. If there's research question slippage, we're not sure whether we're going to have the same research question going out of the study as we are going into the study. This might call for a holistic design so we can develop a better picture of a limited number of units. Embedded design avoids slippage because we have multiple units of analysis. It allows us for more extensive analysis. It also, however, might focus too much on subunits and loses the higher level aspects. And so we might basically not be able to see the forest for the trees, as the old saying goes. We can see a lot of detail, but there might be too much detail at the subunit level, leaving out higher level aspects of the relationships. Multiple case designs require more resources than single case designs, more time and effort. However, they can produce more robust results and compelling arguments. We can somewhat control for the role of context by wisely picking our cases. Now, one of the things you have to realize is we're not going after sampling here. And I'll explain what I mean in the next slide. We're really looking at trying to replicate the results of one study within another context. So there's this concept of replication versus sampling logic. Sampling is statistical. We try and gather as much information as possible, large amounts of data, so we can have relatively narrow confidence intervals in our results. But what we're after in case study designs is really replication. We call analytical generalization. This is analogous to what would happen if we had a controlled experiment that we did, or a randomized experiment, in many different places, and we would simply go and try and figure out whether the results replicated themselves. The goal of replication type of studies is to duplicate results from previous work. We're trying to find convergent evidence. So if in one study a certain indicator of, unhappiness shows to be important, we hope to see that same thing in the next study, so we can start to say something about the role of that factor on unhappiness. We also have this notion of literal versus theoretical replication. Literal replication is where we get similar or equivalent results. Theoretical replication, we don't necessarily have to get similar or identical results. They may be contrasting, but they should be contrasting for predictable reasons. We should be able to point out and say, well, this is a different result because of it's in a larger city, or it's in a East Coast city versus a Midwest city, etc. If cases are contradictory, the initial proposition must be revised. Remember pattern matching. We're trying to match patterns, and we're even trying to match them across cases. If you can't do that, then you have to revise the proposition in the research. This is sometimes called redesign. You go and you redesign your research. And if you don't do this, you can be accused of using basically tendentious research. You're distorting or ignoring the discovery to accommodate your design. A prerequisite of successful replication is a rich theoretical framework. Just like before, concept mapping is everything. We don't know how to replicate or under which conditions to replicate unless we have a good sense of what the theory says. Our large cities, people are going to be more unhappy in small cities. We need to know, in order to design a replication experiment or case study, we need to be able to pinpoint the characteristics which are going to be most likely to be a good candidate for a replacement. The number of cases is very fuzzy. There is no guiding light, 3 cases, 4 cases, 5 cases, 10 cases. There's no kind of bottom line number of cases that we have to give. One of the easiest ways to understand why multiple case designs are better is to understand what we get with multiple cases. We get literal replication, hopefully. We get results which are identical or very similar in 2 different areas. That's replication. We have one city describing something and another city saying, yes, this is exactly what we see. In more complicated multiple case designs, you tend to see both literal replication and theoretical replication. The difference here is how they're responding to different types of conditions. And so if we expect people to be more unhappy as their bosses yell more, if we get the people are more unhappy when their bosses yell more between 2 cases, we can be pretty sure that's the direction of the relationship and the effects of the relationship. Now, in theoretical replication, we can look at different types of conditions. So does the boss yell more right after he gives us a raise? We may not be as unhappy in that case. And so you have to be able to kind of, with a multiple case study, sort out these different effects and what you're looking for in terms of replication. So that's it for this lecture. In the next session, we're going to discuss measurement issues. Thank you very much.